Today we're going to look at creating your first calculator on Xcode using Swift. So it's going to be looking something like this, where you can put two numbers in your emulator and either add them, subtract them, divide them, or multiply them. You can also store and have the program store this 20, and you can recall it inside the text field 1, where you can then add 20 plus 5. So without further ado, let's get started. We're going to open up a new project in Xcode. And single view app as always, and this is app 10 and your ID. We're going to head over to our main.storyboard and start adding our objects. I'm going to go ahead and change this to an iPhone SE, as well as my emulator, and start adding my title. Let's call this my first calculator. Change it a little bit here, make it semi-bold maybe, so it stands out, and center it. We're also going to need a label. I'm just going to copy and paste this one for my whatever is going to be inputted here as from the user, or the result of what's inputted by the user. And I'm going to delete it, make it bigger, and delete whatever is inside, and I'm going to put some background to it, color, some gray. And I'm going to add my two text fields. So my text field 1 and my text field 2. Finally, I'm going to add my buttons. First one is going to be addition. And as before, some background color to my button. Make it a little bit squarish. Okay. Copy and paste it to add my other buttons. I don't know why this is bigger. Copy and paste it and add my division, and finally multiplication. I'm going to put an X. We're also going to add two new buttons that we did not see in class. And it's going to be the store, store, and recall button. So what the store is going to do is going to do, as it says, it's going to store data of the result, and the recall button will display it inside this text field 1. And that's it for my objects. Now let's head over to the code. So I'm going to make some space inside the class view controller and start creating my connections. my label, I'm going to call this label result, my text field 1, text field 2, button addition, change it to action and to UI button, button subtraction, button division, gonna call this one button store, and finally my button recall. You can do as I do and just create your connections in one go or on the whim. Okay, so let's start with our first button. It's going to be addition, and what we're going to do is create two constants. One is going to be called let value 1, which is a constant, equal to whatever the user inputs here, so text field 1 dot text. However, since whatever the user inputted here is text itself, even though it's a number, the computer is not going to recognize it as an integer, so we have to convert it into an int by putting int at first, exclamation mark, and an exclamation mark at the end. I'm going to do the same for my text field 2, so value 2 equals to text field 2, and now I have two constants, or whatever you'd like to call them, where if I would put a 2 here and a 3 here, value 1 will be a 2, value 2 would be a 3. The errors I keep getting here, which are yellow errors, which are not critical for the functioning of the app itself, are just telling me that we have never created a value 1 before, and it's just checking that it's not an error on our part, and it's not. So I'm just going to skip it. I'm going to create another constant, and I'm going to name it sum. Let sum equal to value 1 plus value 2. So we have three variables, or constants in this case. And finally, I'm just going to change my label result dot text equal to sum. But right now, sum is a integer because we changed value 1 and value 2 to an integer. Sum is the sum of these two integers, so our label, which is read in string, has to be string, so we have to put a conversion of string with this as uppercase and two parentheses. So that's it. We just created our first button, which we can copy and paste into our subtraction button. The only thing we're going to change here is let minus, maybe call this variable minus, equals value 1 minus value 2, and here put minus. We're going to do the same thing for division, division, and division, and like that. Multiplication, let's call it multi. And there we go. That's our 4 buttons. They're correctly coded. Next up, we're going to code our storing button and our recalling button. So, since we want the program to remember a constant or a variable, the value of a variable, we want the program to remember, we're going to create a global variable. So whenever we run the program once more. Whenever we run the program, it will be clicking a button. The program itself is going to remember the value if we put it over class view controller. So this is going to encompass even more than just the class view controller we're working on. So I'm going to call this var store, which is a variable instead of a constant. And I'm going to make it equal to 0 because I want the computer to know that it's an integer. And then I'm going to go to my button store, and I'm just going to put store is going to be equal to whatever is on label here, label results, text. And I'm going to do the same as before and convert it into an integer. So what I just did here is whenever I click store, it's going to take whatever is displayed here, and it's going to store it in a variable called store. And if we were to click our recall button, it's going to display it. How? We're going to make text field 1 dot text. It's going to be equal to store, and we just have to convert it into a string, and that's it. I don't know why it's not detecting text field 1. We have an error. Oh, it's the uppercase F. There we go. So let's run our program, see how it goes. So while this is loading, which may take a while, I'm gonna spoil the results and tell you that if we were to put a 3 here and a 4 here and use the division, it would just give us a 1, since we're working on integers, which are whole numbers from 0 to 9, and not with decimal points. It can even crash the computer because we want an integer here. As you can see, well, we're gonna do it right now once we get it loaded up, but it can crash the computer as we're telling in label result that we want a, where is it, like in this case we want a string of sum, which is the sum of 2 integers or the division of 2 integers. So there's another type of data type called doubles, which is just integers with decimal points. So it's not whole numbers, it's even fractions. So for example, let's do 4 and 3. If we add them, we get 7. That's correct. Subtract them, we get 1. Multiply them, we get 12. But if we divide them, we get 1, even though the answer is 4/3 or 1.3333. So we want it to display decimal points. So what we're going to do, we're going to change all of our ints into doubles. Double, double. Even up here, we're going to put 0.0 because whatever we want to store, we want it to be a double. And let's try it out. Okay, so let's get another example. Let's try 7 and 10. If we add them, we get 17. That's correct with a decimal point, as we're working with doubles. If we subtract them, we get -3. If we divide them, we get 0.7. And multiply them, we get 70. Let's try storing the 70. I'm going to click Store. And I'm going to keep on working. Maybe put 2 and 2. Let's say I want to bring back whatever I stored last, whenever I last clicked Store. Just going to click Recall, and I get my 70 back. And I can get a minus and get a 68, and so on and so forth. So this is your first calculator, and I hope you had fun with it.